Well, it's that time again. Welcome back to Kimmell and Cox, your source for all things entertainment. I'm Keith Cox. I'm joined, of course, by my good friend Dylan Kimmell. And if you missed last week's episode, man, it was good.
Yes, very good.
We did our celebrity profile on Dan Aykroyd, and we've gotten a lot of positive response with that so far.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely more to come of those celebrity profiles.
Yes, absolutely. And just something worth noting here, there was actually a little bit of extra stuff that you guys did not get the chance to see. We were running really long on time on that episode anyway, and so we were trying to trim the fat as much as we could.
There was still a lot there that everyone missed.
Yeah, there was a few things kind of missing. If it seemed a little odd or like something got cut out, it's because it did. It sort of made it seem like we stopped talking about Dan's career right around Christmas with the Cranks, which was in 2004, and I'm like, he did plenty of stuff after that. So anyway, head on over to our Patreon page, and we actually have that deleted footage for you over there. That's the only place you're going to be able to see it. So that's a chance for you to check out that page and some of the other benefits that we've got offered over there, and but you can see that extra footage. So definitely check that out when you get a chance. But now on to today's episode. Today we are going to be talking about pop culture in the 1980s. Certainly our favorite decade, hands down, I think. I was actually a child of the 80s, was born at the tail end of 1980 on December 21st. Dylan, on the other hand, was not, but he still loves the 80s.
I was barely even a concept. But yes, the 80s, I adore the 80s because, well, honestly, that was like the best movie era, in all honesty.
Yeah, it really was. Movies, TV, music, everything really. Just in the 80s, it was so different than any other decade. I don't know why, but it was just, there were so many things going on culturally and politically and entertainment wise, which of course is what we're going to be focusing on. But
yeah, so all right. Well, how did the 80s treat you?
I mean, it was a very memorable time for me. Again, that was, the bulk of my childhood, basically from birth until the age of 9 was spent in the 80s. So there were just so many, so many great things out there, as far as technology and the things that were developing then. It was a great time to be a kid. I mean, arcades were all the rage back then. And arcade games, which eventually transitioned into video games. Home video games when they started. Well, it kind of started a little bit before the 80s, but it
didn't really boom until.
Yeah, I mean, with Nintendo, and 85, I guess, was when that home video, the video game consoles, really started blowing up. And I can remember getting, my first Nintendo. Our family had an Atari 2600 before that, which was my brother's video game console. That was I think it was late 70s, I think, when that came out. But Nintendo was huge, and I remember I got the original Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt were the two games that came with that video game system. And then of course, you had home video, with VHS. Really hit the market, you know, in the early 1980s. Video was something that was slowly being introduced before that, maybe like the late 70s, but it was the 80s was when it really took off, and you saw video rental stores popping up everywhere. And that was certainly a huge part of my childhood, was going to the video store you know, almost every weekend, and, you know, renting a movie, just being able to, you know, that going from only being able to see a movie in the theaters to suddenly being able to watch it on your TV at home anytime you wanted, that was huge for the entertainment industry.
You know, I really miss video rental stores. I really do. Streaming has really taken over. I mean, it's very convenient. I understand conveniency. We live in an age where conveniency is power.
Yeah.
And I miss the simplicity of actually going to a rental store and getting a movie. Arcades, they ended up dying a little bit sooner than rental stores, but I do remember a few arcades, and those are, I mean, arcades are really fun too. It's the combination of a whole, you know, you going in there to play a video game, you're going in there to buy a movie, and you have a whole bunch of other strangers around you there that are experiencing the same thing, and you feel normal, you feel like a piece of, you know, culture there.
Yeah.
And even the movie theaters today are starting to feel like that's being forgotten as well.
Sadly, it is. You know, that part of our culture is slowly waning. I think it's coming back a little bit. I mean, obviously the pandemic had a lot to do with movie theaters slowing down and just not getting as much business. But it's still not like it used to be.
People have become a little bit more isolated, a little bit more lone wolf. That's kind of sad, because me being an introvert, that's not good for me. Yeah, I need someone that
you need something to get you out of that box, and so many people do. They would rather just sit at home and, you know, and binge watch on, you know, Netflix or whatever their favorite streaming service is, and so it's kind of sad, really. Yeah, I definitely miss that too. That was something that I always enjoyed as a kid. But you know, speaking of technology, you know, there were a lot of other things that were really that are now commonplace, that really started to make its way into society in the 80s. Cell phones, you know, or rather car phones, and, you know, one of the things that we kind of want to talk about is the way that the entertainment industry in particular, because that's what the show is about, and the ways that it influenced popular culture. And I think that's a good example of that, is because in the 80s you were starting to see all these movies with like these you know, wealthy executives and stuff driving around in their like BMWs and Mercedes and, you know, convertibles with these gigantic car phones, you know, that actually still had a cord attached to them. Like, it was literally like having a regular phone, but, you know, in your car. And that gradually transitioned into, you know, cell phones, you know, with, you know, wireless technology, you know, being developed. But then before you know it, you know, you start seeing more people driving around with those phones in their car, carrying cell phones, and so that whole thing really kind of started jumping in the 80s. I feel like, you know, and music with you know, cassettes, and then CDs, of course. You know, before that you had, you know, records, like LPs and eight tracks, but the 80s was really where, you started seeing the little cassettes, and I had tons of cassettes as a kid.
I remember my dad having a few records of ZZ Top.
Yeah.
He would have a whole mess of little cassette tapes everywhere. And I wonder if cassette tapes will ever... They probably won't ever come back either, just like VHS tapes, because I don't know. I mean, you have the vinyl records have come back, but that's more like a sort of like a hobby, I guess. Or
yeah, well,
the sound is a little bit different too.
Yeah, it's definitely improved compared to, you know, like a if you go out to the store now, because you can buy a brand new record player now, but it's like the technology is the same, but it's a little bit different at the same time. If that makes sense.
It's like if it is what the record player would be modern.
Yeah, pretty much. And then of course, you know, we can't forget about PCs. You know, home computers. You know, another big thing. It's like, you know, the 80s was the birth of so many different things that we have gotten so used to now, because before that, computers were mainly used by businesses and major corporations and things like that, and a computer used to take up a whole room. I mean, you just had these big banks of machines, you know, and that was the computer. And gradually over the years, they kept, you know, figuring out ways to condense that and make it smaller and smaller and smaller, to where you literally could just have a PC and a monitor right there in your home and access everything that everyone else can.
There's a joke there somewhere, and I don't know what that joke is yet, but it'll come to me. It will be like probably 3 weeks down the line. I'll have a joke for you about that.
It's usually in most cases bigger is better, but in the case of you know, computer technology, smaller is what everybody wants.
Yeah, same with phones.
You know, compact. And now we basically got computers inside our phones. You know, which is crazy. You know, just to think of what we're able to do now, which at that time just seemed crazy.
I mean, it's both. There's a pros and cons to having a computer with you all the time, and that's because you have access to knowledge all the time. And I can see the pros to that, but I can also see the cons to that too. I mean, I'd say there's a lot more know-it-alls all over the world now.
Yeah,
because they're like, well, let me just check here on my phone. And
oh yeah, I've known people like that just, you know, you tell them something and they immediately feel the need to fact check you, and like, you know, they get on their phones like, well, you know, like they don't believe you, you know. And now granted, you know, no matter what anybody tells you, you can't believe everything that you read on Google, on the internet.
Shoot, I mean, know-it-alls, I mean, with me in particular, if there's a know-it-all in the room, I just let them believe, you know, just let them go.
Just let them do
I mean, like I had a boss that told me about how he knew the Joker was from Dark Horse Comics before he entered DC Comics, and I was thinking, wait a minute, what are you talking about? But I just like, yeah, you're right, yeah, go. Like I remember some sort of Keanu Reeves interview where he said something like that: 2 + 2 = 6. You're right. Go on. Have a wonderful day. Oh, there I go, kicking my camera.
It's like, if that, you know, whatever helps you sleep at night, if that makes you feel better, hey, you know, just roll with that.
Yeah.
But I think something that really describes the 80s in a lot of ways is typically, I feel like everything was bigger in the 80s. Like, you know, everything was big.
Shoulder pads?
Big hair, yes. Yeah. Shoulder pads, oh gosh. Like, and you know, you know, they say everything comes back around. That's a trend that I really did not want to see come back around with shoulder pads. It's like you had all these women walking around that looked like they were wearing coat hangers inside their dresses. It was not a good look at all.
Some of those trends have come back.
But they have. Yeah. It is coming back around. You had the big sunglasses. You know, everybody was into the huge, aviators and I have a pair of aviators. I love the aviators.
I'd say those are the only good glasses, honestly.
But then you had the plastic sunglasses too, that the giant ones that look like big bug eyes, and big jewelry. Everything was big. Giant hoop earrings and things like that, and people just wearing lots of gold and everything around their neck, and rings and bracelets, and it was like everything was big in that decade.
Yeah. But there was a lot of big things that came out of that year, film-wise as well, and TV-wise. I'd say those are like the biggest. What's the word?
Some of the most influential and iconic movies, I think, came out of that decade. And we certainly there's just a laundry list of movies that we could go through that we love from that decade. I think.
I have a list here of all and to tell you the truth, there's movies on my list and there's movies on your list. I know that we'll never get to all of them. I don't think.
Well, we will eventually. We'll probably talk about
separately,
a lot of them, but
not in this episode.
Not now, but when you get into pop culture and how entertainment, influenced pop culture, the 80s was huge for like the teen comedy. That's where we really started seeing a lot more of those movies,
especially with John Hughes movies.
Yes, but you had movies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I've not seen that.
Oh, you got to see it. That's like classic.
I've not seen it.
Yeah. It's.
Even my dad, like when I said I've not seen that movie, he's like, "You've not seen that movie?" Like offended completely.
Yeah. It's. We actually. The funny thing was, I had a film history class in college. Yeah. And believe it or not, that was one of the films that we studied. That's not the kind of movie you would think would belong in a movie about film history, but it just goes to show you, how much movies like that have become part of our culture and have influenced the way that we see things and the way that we do things. So you had movies like that, and The Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yes.
And so when I think of in terms of like culture and fashion and music and all those kinds of things, like those are movies that kind of stand out to me from the 80s that sort of embody the direction that everybody was heading at that time.
Yeah, and those are some great films from a great writer, which John Hughes. I don't know if you knew this. Yeah, you had to have, because you watched the same docu-series. What's it called? The movies that made us.
Yes, on Netflix.
They were talking about John Hughes, how he would go off into a cabin for about a week and then come back and have a full final draft script. Like, oh my goodness, I wish I could work that way. My mind is always
everywhere. But it's certainly some of our favorite movies of all time, came out of that decade too, and I know you have a list of movies in particular that
Oh geez, and I didn't even list all of them. I was like, you know what, I can't list all of them.
Oh, it's impossible.
Yeah. Oh man, I'll just name a few of them here. Let's see, the Star Wars movie, the last two of the original trilogy of Star Wars. My personal favorite being Return of the Jedi. Yes, I like the ones with the Ewoks.
I liked that one too. Like as a kid, that one was kind of the one that really stood out to me. I don't know why, but for some reason it's always been more of the. Well, I guess they're technically not the original trilogy because it started with Episode 4, but the in terms of production, the first three movies, Return of the Jedi is the one that for whatever reason seems to be more memorable to me. So I get that.
Let's see here. What else did we got? Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yes, another classic.
Filmed by Robert Zemeckis, who just went on to make another classic movie that we both really enjoy as well. Yes. Needs no introduction, I don't think, but yeah.
But yeah, a certain movie about time travel that involves a DeLorean and Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. I don't think we even have to mention the name. But yeah, Robert Zemeckis has certainly directed some wonderful movies over the years, and you know, and many of those came from the 80s. So
yeah, which on our very first episode, that was actually how I was referencing a callback to that first episode when I was saying Steven Spielberg and a certain other director. I was going to go on, and then I just got off track, which I do tend to do. So, and a personal Christmas favorite of mine, Gremlins.
Yes. Gremlins is a Christmas movie for those who. I don't really think there's anybody that could argue that. You might be able to argue that with Die Hard,
Christmas film,
but I still think Die Hard is a Christmas movie. But no, it is a Christmas movie. The entire movie takes place
if it takes place during Christmas, it's a Christmas movie.
He got Billy got Gizmo as a Christmas present. You know, so but yeah, love that movie as well.
And of course we all always mention Ghostbusters.
Yes.
RoboCop.
Yeah, another one that sometimes I kind of forget that.
It is one of those movies that is very it's in your face, but also telling you the truth of how society really is. And that's a scary thing too. Yeah. Because here's another funny thing. Okay, it was true of that time, and then the reboot did the exact same thing, flipped it around, and told you what society is today. The reboot was not as good, but it was still doing the same exact thing.
Yeah, it was still making relevant social commentary.
Yeah, and I think those are the most important films too. Yeah. What else can I mention real quick here? My personal favorite, possibly my first 80s film that I've ever seen, Batman. Yes,
that is one that certainly deserves mention, and you know, that we'll definitely talk in more detail about. But yeah. that was huge for me too, because I was not really into Batman. I was not, you know, a Batman fan before that. Like I was a little familiar at that point with the TV series from the 60s, you know, which I did, you know, I did kind of enjoy as a kid. But that movie, you know, in 1989, like it took, I think it took everybody in a different direction in how they looked at the character. And I was like, wow, this is really good.
And it's so funny because everyone was like saying, Michael Keaton as Batman, what?
Yeah, they're like, you can't have Beetlejuice as Batman. That's not going to work. You know, he was mostly known for comedy at that point, and they just couldn't picture it.
It is so funny because you're coming off of another Batman that's Adam West, which is pretty much a comedy,
campy.
Yeah. And you're getting up in arms about a comedian playing Batman. Yeah. And then the comedian actually turns up a performance that is dark and brooding.
Still my favorite Batman to this day.
For sure. Yeah. He is Batman. Until this day, he often quotes that he is Batman.
Yeah. He's spoken at commencements for various colleges and things like that.
Yes. He said, I'm going to leave you with these 3 words, and these 3 words are very important. If I'm going to leave you, I'm going to leave you with these 3 words, and these 3 words are, I'm Batman.
Yeah. he will always be
Batman.
He will always be. Yeah. 2 words, actually.
Was it 2 words? Yes. He said 2 words.
These 2 words, but no.
These 2 words.
But yeah, it's that was certainly movies like that were a great way to end that decade. And yeah.
Oh, and I have to mention another film, because we actually have we've not spoke a lot about animated movies. And I do believe, I mean, we both have a love for animation. Animation is very important. They have just as important things to tell, and sometimes they go into adult matters that will go over the kids' heads, but the adults will go, oh, yeah.
Well, animation is limitless. As you can do so much more.
You could do so many scopes and everything. I mean, I even talked to you about doing a little animated film at one point for one of my projects that is like so out there that I couldn't possibly get Hollywood to fund it. I don't think. If I were to get that big, But this animated movie is from Don Bluth.
I remember movies from Don Bluth.
And those were some really good ones, honestly. Those were really good. The one that I grew up on the most, I did not grow up on American Tales.
I was gonna mention that. I was like, I think I'm a little fuzzy because I was so little, but I think An American Tale may have been the first movie that I saw in a theater.
Was American Tales 80s or
was 86?
86?
Yeah, so I would have been like 5 at that point. It was not the first movie I ever saw, because we know what that one was, but I think that may have been the first movie that I saw in a theater.
My first, well, I can't say this was my first, but the Don Bluth movie that I have to say is one of my personal favorites in animation. One, it goes into some pretty dark territory as well. But I guess as a kid, I liked the dark stuff. I mean, even when I was little, my mom forbade me. This is not an 80s movie because it came out in 92. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. But it's a sequel to the Batman, so I have to mention my mom did not want me to watch Batman Returns. But I was allowed to watch this, and this was a pretty dark one, Secret of NIMH.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Something about that opening with the hand, the rat hand writing there and it's holding that jewel. It's very beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful animated film.
No.
There's just such artistry, such craftsmanship in that one picture. And it's heartbreaking too. It's really heartbreaking. And,
when you're a kid, you see those things and there's something special about it, but until you get older, you can't really put a finger on what that is. Now we can look at it and we recognize and we say, oh, that's beautiful storytelling there. That the way that they framed that, or the quality of the animation, or those dark themes or whatever. All we know as a kid is like, wow, this is different than anything that I've ever seen before. We don't know why we like it, but we do.
I think most adults even will miss the fact that an animated movie is not just for kids.
No.
It's actually telling you something else that's pretty important. If it's rated G, if a movie is rated G, it's for kids.
Yeah.
But it's
also I mean, G stands for general audiences, so it's really for everybody.
It is, yes. But when I said that, I started to bite my tongue. I was like, wait a minute. That movie Babe, I believe that one was the talking pig.
With the pig,
I believe that one was rated G. I should go back on what I just said there.
But it's true. I mean, because there are revolving themes, in these animated movies and shows and things. There's always some kind of a moral message, and very often
PG. PG is parental guidance. So when an anime movie says parental guidance, it's basically
going to have some adult themes in there.
Yeah. I think people miss on that.
So I mean, we've definitely, the '80s was definitely big for movies, no question about that. Television as well. I think like the big thing in the 80s that was, I guess, revolutionary, not revolutionary, but that took television in a different direction was just cable TV, and that becoming more widely available. You had these, for a long time you only had, 3 TV networks. You had CBS and NBC and ABC. But then gradually, as Ted Turner was really big in introducing cable with like TBS and TNT and CNN and the 24-hour news networks and things like that. Yeah. All that stuff was becoming more popular in the 80s, and the premium movie channels and things like that. So that certainly took TV in a whole new direction. And then of course the shows, some of the shows that were on then, many of which were some of our favorites. But when I think of pop culture in the 80s, I think of shows like Knight Rider.
David Hasselhoff. Yeah.
Yes, I mean it doesn't get any more 80s than David Hasselhoff.
Yeah.
and his big curly hair and leather jackets. And Miami Vice. Gosh, Miami Vice. When you talk about like 80s fashion, Miami Vice probably had more influence than anything else, with like the pastel colors. Wearing suit jackets with the sleeves rolled up, and deck shoes with no socks, and things like that. I mean that show was visually so iconic for the 80s. 21 Jump Street, stuff like that. All
21
those shows
Jump Street was it 21 Jump Street that pretty much showed the world Johnny Depp? Was it that one?
He had I think by then he had already done. He'd already been in a Nightmare on Elm Street. Was in 84.
Yes, that's right.
That was probably the movie that really got him noticed. Yeah. And then because I think 21 Jump Street, I want to say was 87. I think was when it came out.
87.
I have to double check my facts on that.
I believe you're right. I believe it was Nightmare on Elm Street that came out first.
Yeah. But still, I mean, those things. The '80s definitely introduced everybody to Johnny Depp, and
I will say, Nightmare on Elm Street really creeped me out.
My wife still won't watch it.
Oh,
she absolutely hates.
Not even the remake.
She hates the Freddy Krueger movies. She's like, she said I can watch. She doesn't really like the slasher movies in general, but those in particular, she cannot stand those movies.
I can't really say that I do either. I forgot to check to see if it was, but I can't say for certain, but it might have been. But the only sort of like slasher films that I would actually watch is the ones that actually are directed by Sam Raimi, Evil Dead.
Yeah, and I've seen all of those as well.
Have you watched the TV show that came out on Starz?
Yeah, Ash versus Evil Dead. Actually, I thought that was that's getting off topic a little bit, but I think
that's not 80s.
But I think that was my opinion on that was I thought it was kind of better than the movies.
Yes. But honestly, yeah, it really did.
But I know you have a lot of shows too that you thought of. I just mentioned a few, the ones that I thought that really stood out as far as because we're talking about pop culture and the influence of entertainment on pop culture. But you have we have a lot in common as far as 80s shows that we enjoy.
You mentioned Miami Vice.
Yeah.
I have Miami Vice on here. Of course, I also have A-Team. The
A-Team, yes, another one of my all-time favorite shows.
I love it when a plan comes together. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was huge.
Oh yes, I was a Turtles fanatic beginning in the late '80s because the animated series came out in '87.
Yeah, and the movies didn't come out until
like
the '90s.
'90, yeah. But the '80s definitely introduced us to those characters, and the comic books too.
And this is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Absolutely, can't mention the '80s without mentioning He-Man.
I preferred He-Man over Thundercats.
Yeah.
So, the animation for Thundercats was great, but I just did not like the concept. Which He-Man also gave us the Dolph Lundgren starring He-Man, the Masters of the Universe it was called.
probably one of the most popular. Like,
Yeah.
it has a cult following.
Oh yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can see
did
that.
not do well financially. It's kind of regarded, I think, by a lot of people in the industry as a little bit more of a B movie, but it took on a certain life of its own, I guess, just because of the popularity of.
I was waiting for that one bald guy. I can't remember his name, the actor's name, but you know which one I'm talking about. He was the principal in Back to the Future.
Oh,
Strickland?
James Tolkien. That played.
Yes. I was seriously waiting for him to be like slacker to the one. And another thing about the 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, I mean, Schwarzenegger, much like Sylvester Stallone, their careers,
were kind of
started
right,
at right about the same time.
And actually, they were very much competitive too.
Oh, they were. They were always competing, for certain roles, and they sort of had a fun little rivalry going on there.
I believe Schwarzenegger actually tricked Stallone into one movie. I think it was "Don't Shoot" or
Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
Stop, My Mom Will Shoot.
Yeah, which Sly still regards as the worst movie that he's ever done. But even though
we should do an episode on that,
we should. It's even though it's not part of this decade, it's like it's worth mentioning that just because of that rivalry. The two of them, they were like the two top action stars of the 80s.
Like Schwarzenegger got the Terminator, Commando. I had to double check on Terminator because I think that was early. That had
84 was when the first one came out.
I had to double check on that one. Commando and Predator.
Yeah. Stallone had Rocky started in the 70s but transitioned to the 80s. But then he had Rambo, which was basically his, sort of like his version of those movies like Commando and Predator and stuff like that. So they were kind of doing these similar roles. And Cobra was another really good action movie from the 80s. So yeah, all of that stuff. This is what the 80s brought us in terms of of what was being put on screen in movies and TV. Now, music. We hadn't talked about music yet, but certainly music in the 80s took on a whole new life, and I think a lot of that had to do with the birth of MTV.
And honestly, there's nothing that... I mean, if you tried to remake those songs today, it's not going to be any good.
No. There was just a different style and vibe about the 80s that just has not been repeated. You just really can't imitate it.
Yeah, you can't replicate it at all.
But MTV just music has always been a huge part of society and culture and everything, even going all the way back to classical music. So it's music influences us in ways that sometimes we don't even understand or realize. But but with MTV, and especially with music videos in particular, that elevated music to a different level. Because now, people could actually, see their favorite artists performing these songs, and then you had these almost like little movies that would accompany them and kind of told the story. And from then on, you heard certain songs in a different way because now you had an image in your head, to go with them. And certainly some of the artists that come to mind, when I think of that decade and music videos in particular, were Madonna. I mean, you can't really talk about the 80s without mentioning Madonna, and certainly, a lot of these artists, again, kind of goes back to fashion and the ways they influenced fashion in the 80s with with lots of denim and leather and things like that. But Michael Jackson, certainly. I mean, again, he was already known, but the 80s was when he was becoming a solo artist after he broke away from his brothers, and like Thriller. I mean, Thriller is still one of the all-time greatest music videos ever, because it was basically done like a film. I mean, it was directed by John Landis, and that just shows you the crossover and, like, you know, the influence that, you know, that movies had on music and vice versa. And then it was like the perfect way to bring those two things together. And suddenly it was like, you know, this song became something that was all of a sudden really like cinematic. And then of course, you know, one of my favorite groups from the 80s, and, you know, and I believe one of yours too, was Huey Lewis and the News.
Yes.
They were the kings of, you know, when you think of bands as opposed to like solo artists. You know, it doesn't really get any more 80s than that. And they were some of the first to, when MTV came out and started putting out music videos, they were one of the first groups to make music videos. So yeah, definitely worth mentioning there.
And yes, Huey Lewis and the News. I mean, yes, you have to be a fan if you sung, you know, their song at your wedding.
I sang "The Power of Love" to my bride at my wedding last year, and and it was such a because that's just me, and all of my friends, you know that, and know that kind of thing is just a part of my personality, because I love to sing anyway. But
and there I was in the background looking like a scorned lover. like how could you, Keith? How could you marry her?
He did. He kept sort of like it all the. I was looking, you know, we looked back at our wedding pictures, and I was like, oh, there's Dylan. You know, he's just sort of, just hanging out in the background, just, you know, chilling.
I'm kind of mad at the photographer for doing that to me.
Yeah.
He even came by right next to me and just took a picture of me just right there.
Yeah,
he's like, this is gonna be good. Yeah.
It's like, instead of telling you to like do something or be, you know, or pose or whatever, it just. Yeah, but
I was tapping my foot while you were singing and everything like that, but that was not enough. I still looked the way I did.
But yeah, I mean that, you know, it's just feel good music. You know, is the best way to describe that. And you know, of course, they you know, provided, you know, 2 songs for Back to the Future, for the first Back to the Future, and which is what introduced me to their music, and from then on I was like, you know, I was a Huey Lewis fan, and then that kind of leads into talking about soundtracks and the way that soundtracks were becoming
really popular, actually.
It's because before then you really didn't have like
there was no movies that had a specific song played by
maybe you might have maybe 1 or 2 songs that were written for a movie, but as far as like having hiring you know, different artists to come in and do a song for a movie so that you could put together a whole album. That didn't really happen before the 80s.
So you had Back to the Future, which was one of them. Ghostbusters, which had Ray Parker Jr.
Great soundtracks.
I mean, oh my goodness, you can't even you cannot replicate Ray Parker Jr.'s song there. And then you even had Batman. Batman had Prince.
Prince did the entire soundtrack for which is almost
songs on that.
Like it was literally it. Like every song on the Batman soundtrack was by Prince, which was, again, you know, unheard of at that time, because, you know, typically with a soundtrack you have, you know, a variety of artists on there, but he literally did he did every song for the Batman soundtrack, but just to separate, because some people may not really know the difference. I think most people do, but the difference between a soundtrack and a score. You know, the score is the
that's from the composer.
Yes, that's like the the music that accompanies the action and the scenes throughout the movie, the background.
Yeah, the music is the emotional core to the movie.
Yeah.
That is, the music is actually telling you what you should be feeling at that time, whereas a soundtrack is just to accompany the movie. It's basically like the, how would I describe it? The love story of the movie, the
feel, maybe.
The feel, yeah.
And I think it's also soundtracks. I think are more of a marketing thing.
They're definitely more marketing.
Because it boosts not only the movie, the popularity of the movie, but also the artists who are on the soundtrack. Yeah. Most of which are usually already very popular by then.
And it certainly helps out a movie that actually is not any good.
Oh yeah,
which you
soundtrack
would see,
can elevate a movie for sure.
You would see that. I mean, obviously the movies we've mentioned there are really good, so that just elevates them to another new high. Later on in like certain other decades, like 90s, 2000s, 2010s, whenever you get a soundtrack, usually those movies are not very good.
But there have been more. We have seen more actual musical scores from movies starting to be released. Even from some of those classic films that we love, because they realize there's a market for that out there too, and people that are like, I really like that music, but I would love to hear it without all the dialogue and sound effects and everything.
There is a YouTuber
crowding it.
There is a YouTuber. You might have quite an enjoyment out of this here, but he hasn't done a video in so long. And I was first introduced to this YouTuber way back when YouTube was just first starting out, and he actually took the soundtracks from Batman '89. He might have done one for Ghostbusters. I don't know. I don't think so. No, but he did do one for Back to the Future. And this YouTuber is called Golden Tusk. And he's not done anything in a long time, but he will take the soundtrack and he will actually put lyrics to the soundtrack there.
Oh, okay.
So for Back to the Future, he goes, "You built a time machine out of a car, a DeLorean."
That's pretty awesome. So there's another company out there, and I wish I could remember the name of it now, but there's another company that has started taking soundtracks from particularly movies from the 80s and have rendered 16-bit versions of the musical score and also some pieces from the soundtracks. And so basically it's the music from the film, but it's done in the style of like video game music from the 80s, as if that music had been made for a video game.
That is great. That is great.
And I'll look that up and maybe mention that on the next episode, because the name of the company escapes me. They have a website, and they've already done the soundtrack for Batman 1989 and also Ghostbusters 2. That's been their first two releases.
So weird calling it Batman 1989 now.
Yeah, but you almost have to, because if you
don't want to get it confused,
if you just say
with
Batman, you could get it confused with the 60s TV series,
or the more recent one with Twilight,
or the Batman with Robert Pattinson. So yeah, I mean the 80s, without a doubt, one of the most memorable decades ever. And even if you didn't grow up in the 80s, it still has an impact today. And
I'm
Dylan's
right
proof
here.
of that.
Yeah.
And like I said, everything comes back around eventually, and we've started seeing that more and more. That the 80s has left a lasting legacy, an impact on a lot of us. Well, we're just about out of time, but before we go, please remember to subscribe, like, and share on our YouTube channel. And when you subscribe, be sure to tap that bell icon to make sure that you're receiving all the notifications when new content is posted. Don't forget to follow us on our socials. You'll find those links at the bottom of your screen, as well as down below in the video's description, and at the end of every episode in the closing credits. So there's no way you can miss them. leave your comments and questions for us. You can reach us by commenting on YouTube or on our socials, or by emailing us at kimmellandcox@gmail.com. That's our official podcast email. We want to hear from you. Talk to us. We want you to be a part of the conversation, and that just, makes it a lot more enjoyable for us. You can also support us on our Patreon page. We need the support of people like you. Check out that page to learn more about how you can help, and we've got that link for you too. So that's all we've got for you today. We hope you'll join us next week, and until then, be good to yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Good, you dipstick.